The biggest question with Scholar of the First Sin is, who is it for? Because they're not just porting the game to next gen, they're actually adding elements that might make you want to play again. They're incentivizing another playthrough for old players, and enhancing the experience for new ones. And ultimately that is a good thing, but it's kind of forced you into this awkward position where you have to ask yourself the question, is it worth it for me to play through this game again? And everybody's going to have a different answer for that. Some people might just download the free patch on February 5th, and some people might repurchase the entire game for their more powerful systems in April. Both of these versions will have different features, so if you want a list of those, then you should definitely check out the description, because it can get pretty confusing. But most of you are interested in the next-gen version that offers everything. The new enemy placements, the new enemies, the different lore, everything. And that's what I got to play this week. I made the trip down to San Francisco, where I got to play the full game, and I got to learn about what exactly was new, so I hope I can help you guys decide whether you'd want to play another playthrough, or whether you'd like to make another purchase. So there are going to be three major things that might entice you to play. There's improved enemy placements, improved graphics, and better storytelling. So let's start with enemy placements and what I got to see. The first thing everybody at the event noticed was this ogre. He wasn't there before, you have to sneak past him, and it introduces a stealth element centered around an enemy new players definitely should have realized is difficult at this point. Further up in a clearing up the ladder, there's almost 3 times as many hollows lying in wait for you, and getting through this section is like going through a minefield, trying to only aggro one enemy at a time, and trying not to get overwhelmed. In the next section, there's now an archer shooting at you while you fight other enemies in melee. So these areas and the enemies within them are designed way better than they were previously, and as you play through the entire game, you realize that most sections that were lacking before have improvements like these now. And you'll see a bunch of them in the footage being shown, I'm sure. Some are better because the enemies are in different places, and some flat out have different enemies that just make more sense in those locations. Expect some Haid Knights actually in Haid, and more Desert Sorceresses in Harvest Valley, you know, that kind of thing. Since this game is running on better hardware, the AI is better too. Enemies will chase you practically forever now, from what I could tell, so they'll catch you if you try to run through an area. And you also notice enemies patrolling now, moving around in the environment, which forces you to learn their patterns and sometimes can make an area feel a bit more real and a bit more lived in, if that makes sense. So the elements of the better AI, like having enemies follow you further, was explained to me as a result of having better hardware. And speaking of better hardware, let's talk about the graphics and the lighting in this build. So you should have got a pretty good feel of what it looks like. Simply put, the game feels like you're playing on PC. It's 60 FPS, it's got sharper textures, and that's all great, but it's not quite as pretty as the demo was, which I know a lot of you were hoping for, me included, but it is better than the console and the PC versions, from what I can tell. And I am really happy to announce that one feature of the demo has made it through to the next-gen versions of the game, the dark areas. You first notice this in the basement that you can unlock after the last giant, so everything immediately becomes pitch black, just like it did in the demo, and you finally get to make that decision. Should I use a torch in my offhand and see more, or should I use a shield and defend against the things coming at me in the darkness? So I'm sure it's no coincidence that all of the enemies in the dark area have changed, so you won't know what's in there, and you won't know what's coming at you. But the thing is, the environments haven't changed, so for an experienced player who knows how to navigate these areas, you probably won't spend very long in the dark areas because you'll just dash right through. And that's a bit of a minus, but for new players, this is awesome and I'm really happy for them. To be honest, it wasn't dark in as many areas as I hoped it would be. But at least they've upped the contrast, so you can't just go through dark areas with your brightness settings turned up anymore. And it's cool to have this implemented, but like I said, better for new players, not as great for experienced players. So the world hasn't changed, but there are more significant encounters, and I imagine for a new player the entire game is going to be a much more memorable experience, but for an old player, an experienced player coming back, the most they're probably going to get out of you is a, huh, that's new, kind of feeling, and that's what I got when I was going through. The game isn't a completely revolutionized experience, so you shouldn't buy it or play it expecting that. One of the biggest things that will change your experience, though, is the placement of weapons. I found the Grand Lance shortly after the last giant, and I used it all the way until the Demon of Song, so that was a refreshing character change for me. Usually I pick up a weapon like the S-Stock or the Great Sword, and I pretty much go through most of the game with that, but since all the weapons are switched around, it means that you'll be crafting entirely different characters to tackle a slightly different experience, so that's pretty cool. But overall, if you liked Dark Souls 2, then you'll like it even more. But if you don't like Dark Souls 2 because the level design is lacking, or because you didn't like the enemies or the bosses, then nothing Scholar of the First Sin will do can fix that. The world is the same, the flow of the game is the same, the enemy designs are the same, and for you, the only thing that might be interesting is the story. Item descriptions have changed in a big way. Pretty much every one I read had an extra paragraph added to it, which you'll be able to see when the patch drops on February 5th. So you can expect a lot of videos on this stuff, and even if you don't play, you'll be able to see that and experience that, so make sure you're subscribed for that. But mostly though, I expect the major story significance to come towards the end of the game. So overall, everyone's going to be in a different camp with Scholar of the First Sin, and there are a lot of options available to you. I'd really love if you could tell me what you plan on doing. Are you going to download the patch and just meet the Scholar of the First Sin? Or will you wait until April and play through with updated graphics and updated enemy behaviors and enemy placements? Or will you do neither of those things? And are you interested in watching my videos on the Scholar of the First Sin? So there's a straw poll down below and a comment section for you all to vote in, so I can try to figure out how many of you are actually interested in this. And it's also worth noting that I'm really confident that PC players will be getting a discount when repurchasing the game, but you really should definitely wait for an official statement on that. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll be bringing you some Scholar of the First Sin and also some Bloodborne stuff as soon as I get back home, so there's a lot of stuff to cover in the next few months. And I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.